5 seconds before she ruined my reputation, I knew Rachel was about to pull something. She'd been waiting for this, smiling through her teeth, sipping Cabernet like it was her weapon of choice. I watched her lift her glass, eyes gleaming like a predator tasting blood in the air. And then she struck. We were mid-toast. Derek, my husband, stood, glass raised, talking about family values and how grateful he was for all of us. Ironic, in hindsight. I was seated next to him, half listening, half tracking Rachel's body language. She wasn't even pretending to be gracious anymore. The table was full: Derek's parents, his aunt and uncle, a few cousins, and of course, Rachel, his perfect little sister, always polished, always watching, always calculating. And then there was her flavor of the month boyfriend, Grant. Grant, who looked like he paid extra to seem deep, but sounded like he memorized Andrew Tate tweets for dinner conversation. Derek was just wrapping up his clumsy toast when Rachel stood up. Smooth, confident, like she was on stage. And then, loud enough to cut through the last clinks of glass, she said, "Before we keep toasting to family values, maybe Natalie can explain why she's been meeting strange men in hotel bars?" The room froze. She tossed a manila envelope onto the table like a poker hand she knew would win. Photos spilled out. Glossy. High quality. Me, in various hotel lobbies, sitting with men. One had his hand on my lower back. Another looked like we were laughing. Taken from a distance. Secret angles. Sleazy precision. Gasps. Silence. Silverware stopped midair. Karen, Derek's mother, stared at the photos like they were written in a language she didn't understand. I didn't flinch, because I knew this was coming. Derek's face turned pale. His eyes locked on the photos like they were evidence in a trial he didn't remember agreeing to. He didn't even look at me. Not yet. Just blank. Processing. I pushed my chair back gently and stood up. No words, no theatrics, just grace. I smoothed down my dress, adjusted my bracelet, and looked at Rachel. She was waiting. Waiting for me to beg, to deny, to cry. She wanted the scene. She wanted me to break. I tilted my head slightly and said, "I hope you all enjoy your dinner." Then I walked out. Not a single soul tried to stop me. Not Derek. Not even Karen, who usually rushes to smooth things over when Rachel lashes out. No, they just sat there, silent, stunned, and feeding on the performance like it was dessert. I stepped into the cold October air and let it fill my lungs like a reset. The sky above was clear. My heels clicked against the stone walkway, sharp and sure. And with every step, my pulse slowed. Not from fear, from clarity. Because I hadn't been ambushed. I'd been baiting her. Rachel always needed to feel smarter. Always needed to be the center of moral authority. And I had given her just enough rope. A breadcrumb trail of evidence, carefully curated. The meetings, the outfits, the body language, all intentional. I knew she'd take the bait. I knew she'd dig. I just didn't expect she'd be stupid enough to go nuclear at a dinner table. But hey, I wasn't complaining. By the time I slid into the driver's seat of my car, the adrenaline was starting to shift. Not fade, just transform. Rage? No. That had burned out months ago. What I felt now was something else entirely. Focus. I drove home with the windows cracked, letting the wind cool the fire behind my ribs. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I didn't need comfort. I needed revenge. Back in the apartment, I kicked off my heels, poured myself a glass of Cabernet, and sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop. The desktop was clean, save for one single folder. Our insurance inside were files, screenshots, PDFs, a timeline, backups of backups. Nothing illegal, but everything useful. Because Rachel wasn't the only one with skeletons. And I'd been preparing for this moment longer than she realized. You want war, Rachel? You're going to get it. But the difference between you and me? I don't throw punches unless I already know exactly where they'll land. I didn't slam doors. I didn't scream. I didn't post a half-baked notes app apology on social media or text Derek some frantic string of, "It's not what it looks like." No, that's what people do when they're caught off guard. I wasn't. I walked into my apartment, locked the door, and set my purse down gently like I'd just come home from yoga. Not from a public character assassination. The lights were low. I didn't bother turning them up. The silence felt earned. I poured a glass of wine, the good bottle I'd been saving, and opened my laptop. The screen flickered awake, soft and familiar. My desktop was clean. One folder sat dead center, labeled in white text, RR Sill Insurance. It wasn't dramatic. No skull icon, no red font, just the cold, neat file where I stored everything I needed to bury Rachel Miller. I clicked it open. Inside were 5 subfolders, each named for a phase. Phase 1, Prep. Phase 2, Digital Footprint. Phase 3, Greystone. Phase 4, Narrative. Phase 5, Detonation. I didn't go in order. I never do. I opened Phase 3. This was the folder Rachel never imagined existed, and the one that could rip the curated life she'd built to absolute shreds. Because about a year ago, I got a whisper. Not a warning. A whisper. A freelance contract came my way. Small gig. Just a few branding audits for a local private prep school. Greystone Academy. I didn't even realize it was Rachel's alma mater until I walked into their alumni lounge and saw her face framed on the Distinguished Graduates wall. Class of 2013. Marketing major turned nonprofit darling. PTA queen. All-American blonde with a Pinterest-perfect smile. But while I was there, I overheard something in the staff kitchen that stopped me cold. Remember when Professor Alcott got fired? Not officially, but, you know. The whole thing with the student. I wasn't trying to listen, but my name hadn't come up once. Rachel's had. She was 20, another voice whispered. He was married. They tried to keep it quiet, but everyone knew. The gears clicked immediately. Rachel had told everyone she left Greystone for family reasons, that her transfer to a city school was because of finances, but something about the way those women whispered told me there was a bigger story hiding behind the official one. And if Rachel had a buried scandal from her past, she should have known better than to accuse me of having one in the present. I started digging that night. Old yearbooks, archived newsletters, class rosters. I found out who the professor was, Philip Alcott, and traced his career. He resigned the same semester Rachel left. His marriage ended shortly after. No police report, no charges. But the timeline was too perfect. I even found an old Greystone subreddit thread from 2013. Anyone else remember the Alcott mess? No names. But the story was there. Student and faculty. Disappeared after academic misconduct. I screenshotted everything. I paid for access to a student blog archive. I joined a closed alumni group using a fake name, Lauren M., and dropped a single comment about missing the old campus vibe. 2 weeks later, someone replied, "Yeah, less scandalous now that the professor war student affairs aren't happening." I didn't need a confession. I just needed enough to build a story. And Rachel gave me the ending when she attacked me tonight. Because here's the thing about reputations. They don't get destroyed by fire. They get destroyed by smoke, rumor, suspicion, whispers wrapped in just enough detail to feel real. Rachel accused me of having secrets, but I had receipts. I closed the Greystone folder and opened Phase 4, Narrative. This was where the real work lived. I'd been writing it in pieces, pacing it like a story, not fact-dumping, not accusations, but experience, empathy, pain. I titled it, A private education, secrets beneath the ivy. A podcast, anonymous, smart, polished, fictional, legally, but real enough to get under people's skin. The intro was done. The first episode? Almost there. I'd even recorded a test read, using a voice filter that dropped my pitch and added a slight southern lilt. I listen to it now. Greystone Academy is known for its legacy, for its discipline, for producing tomorrow's leaders. But behind the ivy-covered walls, not every story is told in the alumni newsletter. It gave me chills, not because it was dark, but because it worked. Rachel had opened the door. Now I was stepping through it. I took a final sip of wine, closed the laptop, and walked to the bedroom. Derek still hadn't called. I wasn't surprised. He was probably still sitting in shock, wondering how his wife could be this composed after being exposed in front of his entire family. He didn't realize I'd rehearsed this moment, that I'd anticipated it. Rachel thought tonight was her victory. She didn't know it was the start of her erasure. Tomorrow, I'd post episode 1 under a new Spotify account and Reddit would do the rest. And Rachel? She'd learn the hard way. Never pick a public fight with a woman who's been writing your downfall in silence. People always assume revenge begins with rage, that it's born in a split-second moment, all teeth and fury. But the truth? Revenge begins with something smaller, a whisper. It was nearly a year ago, back when Rachel was still playing nice, or at least pretending to. Derek's firm had landed a new healthcare client and we were both doing more social favors to keep the in-laws impressed. So when I got offered a short freelance branding gig with Greystone Academy, just 3 days of field research and interviews, it felt harmless. Rachel was glowing when I mentioned it. "Oh, I loved Greystone," she said, swirling her drink at brunch. "Some of my best memories are from there." Of course, she did. Greystone is one of those elite, aggressively ivy-covered institutions just outside Portland. Think uniforms, legacy admissions, and parents with more lawyers than hobbies. It screams privilege. Rachel had always dropped the name like it was an honorary title. Greystone Alum was code for, "I belong somewhere you don't." So I took the job. Irony tastes better when it's aged, anyway. My assignment was simple. Update the Academy's digital voice for incoming donor campaigns, clean up their web copy, interview a few board members, take in the atmosphere, the usual. But on day 2, I was in their staff lounge, grabbing a watery coffee from a machine that probably cost more than my first car, when 2 admin assistants wandered in behind me. "You see who's visiting next week?" one whispered. "Board's bringing in Alcott. Can you believe that?" My ears perked up. No way. I thought he was still blacklisted after, the thing. Apparently not. Guess enough time's passed. "The student thing?" The other woman dropped her voice. "Yeah, the blonde. Wasn't she like 20? And engaged?" I stayed quiet. Didn't flinch. Just sipped my coffee like I wasn't burning inside. They never said a name. But I didn't need one. Because Rachel had been 20. Blonde. And yes, engaged. Briefly. To some trust fund tennis player who vanished right before she transferred out. I walked out of that lounge with one thought circling like a vulture. This is it. Up until that point, I hadn't been looking for ammunition. But the moment I heard that whisper, I felt it. That gut-deep certainty that someone had just dropped a breadcrumb on the path to something bigger. Rachel's polished surface had a crack, and I was going to pry it open with my bare hands. I went home that night and started digging. I didn't just search Rachel Miller scandal. Too obvious. Too broad. No, I started small. Greystone's alumni newsletter archives. Yearbooks. LinkedIn profiles of former staff. I cross-referenced everything. Looked at which professors resigned that year. Only one lined up with her timeline and sudden transfer. Philip J. Alcott. Married. English department. Resigned mid-semester in spring 2013. I found a blurry photo of him from a decade-old commencement ceremony. Tall, clean-shaven, sharp suit, easy smile, the kind of man people trust too quickly. I clicked deeper. His wife had filed for divorce 6 months later. No kids. The more I read, the colder I felt. I wasn't just speculating anymore. This wasn't some vague rumor. This was history, real and buried. The kind that elite schools like Greystone don't scrub completely but hide under layers of polite silence. The kind Rachel had spent years pretending never happened. I found an old blog run by a former Greystone student, mostly poetry and bad breakup advice, but one post stood out. Dated June 2013. It was titled, "What We Don't Talk About." The entry didn't name names, but the message was unmistakable. He was in his 30s. She was barely legal. They said it was consensual. But we all saw how fast she disappeared after he left. We all knew something happened. No one said anything. No one ever does. I saved it. Screenshot, archive link, metadata. By the end of that week, I had over 40 files, dates, interviews, comments, subreddit threads, photos, rumors disguised as memories, and memories wrapped in silence. Rachel's secret wasn't just scandalous, it was survivable, if it stayed buried. But now, it was dry kindling, and she just handed me a match when she humiliated me at dinner. That night, as I built out the podcast episode draft, I paused for a long time over the first sentence. I wanted to tell the story, but I didn't want it to be revenge porn. I didn't want to scream into the void. I wanted people to listen, to remember what silence costs. I typed. She was 20. He was her professor. Everyone knew, but no one did a damn thing. I stared at those words for a long time, because the truth is, I didn't care about destroying Rachel for sport. I cared about truth, about consequences. She made herself the face of morality, called me a whore in front of my husband, in front of our family. She came for me with judgment sharpened like a knife. She just didn't expect me to be holding a scalpel. And I wasn't finished cutting yet. There's something meditative about research. The way most people scroll for dopamine, I scroll for patterns. Inconsistencies, overlaps, names that show up twice when they shouldn't. It's like clearing fog from glass with just your breath and patience. After Rachel's little dinner stunt, I didn't just want to expose her. I wanted to exhume her. And that meant I had to be careful, precise, surgical. My apartment turned into a digital war room. Laptop on the kitchen table, old-school corkboard on the wall, a pile of yellow legal pads stacking like tombstones. I didn't eat much, slept even less, but I wasn't tired. I was tuned. Every search result was a puzzle piece, and I was obsessed with finding where it fit. First stop, Greystone's digital graveyard. See, most schools clean up their public-facing scandals, but they rarely go deep enough. And lucky for me, Greystone had an archive section of their alumni site built by a guy who clearly valued nostalgia more than discretion. It wasn't password protected. It wasn't encrypted. It was just forgotten. Buried in a 2012 PDF of spring campus life highlights, I found a photo. Rachel, center frame, hair blonder than now, smile wide, cheeks sun-kissed, her arm linked through someone tall. Male. Wearing a professor's badge on a lanyard. Philip Alcott. My fingers hovered over the screen. If you looked casually, you'd miss the tension. But I saw it. His hand sat low on her back. Too low. Her posture leaned into him, not with comfort, but the practiced proximity of someone addicted to approval. It wasn't love. It was power. I downloaded it, labeled it RA Campus Soch Contact 2012.jpg, and kept going. Next, faculty forums. I dug into a now-defunct subreddit used by ex-Greystone students. Most threads were dead, but one caught my eye. Posted by U Greystone Ghost 99, dated 6 years ago. Anyone remember when that student-teacher mentorship turned into a quiet scandal and both disappeared? That was some dark shit. Admin never addressed it. Just rumors. Comments were sparse, but one stood out. Her name started with R, I think. Real PTA energy now. Used to wear red lipstick every day like it was war paint. I saved that too. Because the lipstick part? That was Rachel's signature. Still is. Next, I cross-referenced the school's newsletter archives, found an alumni feature from 2014 on unexpected career paths. Rachel was quoted briefly, saying she'd left Greystone to refocus priorities and found her true voice through crisis. Innocuous, right? Until you realize that article dropped 5 months after Professor Alcott's resignation. She was already rewriting her story. It wasn't just a transfer. It was a cover-up. By the end of the week, I had over 70 files, tagged, sorted, dated. Her entire narrative, the one she fed to friends, donors, and church ladies, dissected and pinned to a board like a cadaver. And I was just getting started. I contacted 3 former students using burner accounts, asked vague questions, got vague answers, but one woman messaged me back. Hannah, Greystone class of 2013. She wrote, I remember. It wasn't subtle. They flirted all the time. She was obsessed with him. Told people she was going to marry him. Then one day, poof. Gone. Whole thing got swept. Heard he lost tenure but signed some hush deal. I asked if she'd ever talk about it. She said no. Said it wasn't her trauma to relive. But even that was enough. Because Rachel had tried to erase the scandal. She thought silence was safety. She was wrong. By now, my podcast drafts were fleshing out fast, each episode structured like a fictional tale. Names changed, settings blurred just enough, but insiders, they'd recognize it instantly. Episode 1, The Professor. Episode 2, The Transfer. Episode 3, The Silent Semester. They weren't accusations, they were mirrors, polished just enough to make the right people squirm. But here's where it started to feel real. I started getting followers, a few shares, a few DMs, listens from Oregon IPs, a tweet from an anonymous user that said, "Is this about Greystone? Because I think I knew her." That's when I knew the wave had begun. Rachel still hadn't said a word since the dinner. No apology, no explanation. And Derek? Radio silence. I assumed he was processing, or trying to untangle the mess she made. Either way, I didn't reach out. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was building a case. But as I stared at the growing digital wall in my apartment, something deeper settled in my chest. This wasn't just about Rachel. This was about every woman who's been shamed into silence while someone else's scandal is turned into her burden. About every time I've been told to stay quiet, be classy, don't escalate. About the way families protect predators while blaming the ones who bleed. Rachel opened this door. She tried to paint me as the whore, but in the end, she was the one hiding in plain sight. And now I was going to show the world what she looked like when the lights came on. There's a very specific silence that follows uploading something you can't take back. It's not peace, it's tension. A string pulled taut in your chest. You sit there, blinking at the publish button, your cursor hovering like it could undo everything, and you wait. For what exactly? A lightning bolt? A regret? A goddamn sign? But nothing comes. Just stillness. Just breath. That's how it felt when I launched the podcast. I'd titled it, A Private Education, Secrets Beneath the Ivy. The artwork was minimal, a sketch of ivy vines curling over a crumbling school crest, black and white. The tone? Soft, somber. The kind of thing that sounded like an elegy, The kind of thing Rachel would never see coming, because it didn't scream scandal, it whispered shame. Episode 1 was already finished, edited, and uploaded to 3 platforms under a pseudonym. I didn't use voice changers anymore. I'd leaned into the truth of it. A woman's voice, older now, calm and reflective. I told the story like memory, not exposure. That's what made it powerful. It opened like this. I was 20 years old when I met him. A professor. Charismatic. Married. He said I was different. The way they all do. What happened between us never made the newsletters. But it made me disappear. No names. No school. Just enough to dig into the bones. I structured the rest of the episode like a confessional. An anonymous alumna reflecting on a season of her life she tried to forget. I borrowed pieces from Rachel's own interviews, blog posts, even her Instagram captions. I used her words, turned slightly, just enough to mirror the truth without triggering legal alarms. That was the point. The goal wasn't to accuse. The goal was to awaken. The episode ended with a soft breath and a single sentence. I wonder how many of us were told it was our fault, and how many of them still teach. I sat in the dark after I uploaded it, a candle burning beside my laptop, casting flickers on the wall of files and notes behind me. The corkboard looked like a case file now, red yarn and printouts, maps of shame. I didn't check the analytics that night. I didn't need to, because I knew something Rachel didn't. People are starving for stories that reflect what they've been forced to survive in silence. The next morning, the episode had 301 plays. Small, but real. A few reblogs. Some quiet bookmarks. A Reddit post with 2 comments. Is this about Greystone? And, I think I know who this is. The seed had been planted. And if there's anything I trust more than my own instinct, it's the internet's ability to connect dots you never even meant to draw. By the end of that week, the podcast had 1,400 listens. Episode 2 dropped on Thursday. The transfer. This one went deeper. I built the narrative of the school, Greystone, with enough fictional tweaks to protect my ass. I wove in subtle details. The ivy-covered tower, the distinguished alumni wall, the professor who resigned mid-semester without explanation. The alumna in the story struggled with self-blame. She described the guilt, the manipulation, the way faculty closed ranks, the way she was advised to take a leave of absence for mental clarity, the kind of language used to box women out without making it look like punishment. Listeners started DMing me. I know a story just like this. This happened at my school too. I remember rumors. They warned us not to dress a certain way around him. No one named names, but Rachel's people started getting nervous. By the 3rd episode, the silent semester, the ripple was becoming a wave. Someone posted about it in a private PTA Facebook group. Someone else tagged Greystone's official Twitter asking, "Care to comment?" By then, it was out of my hands. I didn't have to control it. I just had to keep feeding it. I kept my uploads on a tight schedule. Every Thursday at 7 p.m. like clockwork. Like ritual. And the podcast became a quiet reckoning. I never said Rachel's name. I didn't have to. Because the truth is, people don't need facts to believe a story. They need familiarity. A pattern they recognize. A feeling they've been told to ignore, finally given shape. Rachel posted nothing publicly for 2 weeks. Then, suddenly, she made a vague Facebook status. Some people weaponize fiction when they don't have facts. I choose truth. Always have. No comments. The next morning, they were turned off completely. Her Instagram went dark 3 days later. Unavailable, deleted, or hidden. And her curated life, the brunches, the board meetings, the rooftop selfies, began to vanish like mist under heat. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. Because this wasn't revenge in the way people think of it. Loud, flashy, fire for fire. This was erosion. Slow, methodical, certain. I was dismantling the castle brick by brick, and by the time Rachel noticed the walls shaking, I'd already rewritten the blueprints. Derek still hadn't reached out. I didn't care. The podcast wasn't for him. It was for every woman who sat through a dinner like I did and swallowed her tongue because someone else held the power. It was for every woman who got branded a problem because she dared to survive loud. Rachel had tried to burn me alive in front of our family, but all she did was light the match in the wrong house. And now, she was locked inside the one crumbling. It didn't happen overnight. It never does. Going viral is less like lightning and more like a fuse. Short, silent, then boom. It started with TikTok. I hadn't even posted there. Someone else had. A college girl, probably no older than 22, with lavender hair and a voice that made conspiracy sound like bedtime stories. She played a clip from episode 2. The professor resigned, the student disappeared, and the school released a statement that said nothing while saying everything. Over that, she added, "Anyone else getting major Greystone vibes from this fictional podcast? Because some of us remember. Hashtag Private Education Podcast." By the next morning, it had 40K views, then 100K, then 300. And just like that, the podcast wasn't just niche, it was everywhere. Theories exploded in comment sections. Is this about Greystone? Wait, wasn't there a scandal there years ago? My sister went there. She said a girl got pulled mid-semester and no one ever said why. Twitter, or X, whatever the hell they're calling it now, lit up next. The phrase, private education podcast, trended regionally. Then someone connected the dots. Wasn't Rachel Miller a Greystone alum? Wonder what she thinks of all this. That post got quote retweeted 800 times before the user locked their account. Reddit, of course, took it to DEFCON 1. A user in the R Academic Scandals subreddit uploaded side-by-side screenshots. One from the Greystone yearbook, showing Rachel standing beside Professor Alcott. Another, from episode 1's transcript, describing a married professor who once taught literary theory and made his favorite student the subject. The similarities were uncanny, deliberate. People started sharing stories, not about Rachel directly, but about other schools, other patterns. Women came forward, not with names, but with moments. Hallway glances, office hours that lasted too long, teachers who crossed lines without ever leaving proof. The podcast became less about Rachel and more about them. But the more it grew, the more Rachel crumbled. She tried to hold her ground, made a cryptic Instagram reel about people who hide behind fiction because their real life is too sad to matter. She wore a white turtleneck and spoke slowly, like she was giving a TED Talk on Grace Under Fire. Comments started kind, then they turned. This aged like milk. Didn't you go to Greystone? Girl, just log off. The video was down within hours. I hadn't spoken to Derek, not once. But I had started getting texts from numbers I didn't recognize. One of Rachel's former coworkers, a board member from the nonprofit she ran. Even someone from her old Greystone graduating class. Most messages were cautious, polite, vaguely curious. I just wanted to confirm, is that podcast really about Rachel? I never responded. I didn't have to. By the time episode 4 dropped, titled The Apology That Never Came, it hit 200K plays in a day. Apple Podcasts ranked it number 19 in the nonfiction category. Spotify pushed it under trending. And then it happened. The anonymous tip. I got the email at 3:12 a.m., sent from a Proton Mail account with no name, no signature, no greeting. Just. She wasn't the only one. I work there. Alcott had 3. Rachel was just the one who got caught. Attached was a scan of an old faculty memo. It didn't name Rachel, smart, but it referenced a student-adjacent incident involving Mr. Alcott and a confidential withdrawal agreement signed in April 2013. It was dated 1 week before Rachel's transfer. I read it 3 times before I exhaled. This wasn't smoke anymore. This was fire. The next morning, Rachel's nonprofit announced a temporary internal review and leadership suspension pending clarification of public concerns. Translation: they were pushing her out. Her name vanished from their website by Friday. She posted nothing, not even a denial. And I knew why. Because the worst part of a quiet scandal isn't the accusations, it's the watching. Watching people look at you differently. Watching your invitations dry up. Watching PTA moms smile less and whisper more. Watching board members you handpicked move your photo to a lower corner of the newsletter. Rachel had built her identity like a house of glass, polished, precise, fragile. And now? The first crack was spreading. She couldn't patch it. She couldn't even find where it started. Because I was never loud. I was just consistent. And consistency, over time, is what breaks people. It started with a resignation. Rachel didn't call it that, of course. She called it a pause, a mutually agreed step back from public duties to focus on personal healing. The kind of PR language you hire a crisis consultant to write when you're trying to make your downfall sound like self-care. But the headlines didn't play along. Nonprofit director Rachel Miller steps down amid podcast speculation. Was a private education based on real events? Listeners say yes. The vultures had landed, and she was bleeding. Her name didn't trend, not yet, but it popped up in threads, in comment sections, in alumni groups. The same people who once praised her for keynote speeches and charity work now added a different tone to her name. Quieter, hesitant. Like maybe they didn't know her after all. That's what fallout is. Not an explosion. A slow turning of heads. The board at her nonprofit sent out an email to donors assuring them of a full internal review and continued commitment to transparency. Translation: we didn't know, but we know now. Please keep the money coming. Her weekly newsletters stopped. Her calendar cleared. Her social presence froze. And then, the leak happened. I didn't do it, I swear. But someone on the inside did. Maybe one of her silenced colleagues. Maybe a former volunteer who got steamrolled by her need for control. An anonymous Twitter account posted a photo of the memo I'd received. The 2013 Greystone document confirming a student-adjacent incident involving Philip Alcott. Alongside it was a blurred yearbook photo. Rachel, smiling beside him. The caption? We all knew. We were just waiting for someone to say it first. It spread fast. And Rachel? She broke her silence the next day with a Facebook post that felt like a confession written by someone who still refused to admit guilt. I've always believed in second chances, in the power of growth. I was a young woman once who made choices I regret, not because I was wrong, but because others couldn't handle my right to choose. She painted herself as the victim. Classic Rachel. But the comments didn't buy it. You were 20. He was your professor. This isn't about empowerment, it's about manipulation. You tried to ruin another woman to protect your perfect image. Now we see why. By sunset, the post was gone. Screenshotted. Archived. Circulated. Derek finally called me that night. His name lit up my phone like a memory I didn't want to answer. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up. Nat, he said. Just my name. Nothing else. His voice sounded small. I know, he said after a pause. About everything. I didn't respond. I saw the photos Rachel threw down at dinner, he added. I know they were taken out of context. I traced the hotel's security logs. She faked the authorization to get them. Used a burner account and claimed to be your assistant. That stopped me cold. He kept going. The men, they were part of a trauma recovery foundation, right? Yes, I said. My first word. Jesus, he muttered. More silence. I'm sorry, he finally said. For not saying anything, for believing even a second of it, for letting her do that to you. You didn't stop her, I said flatly. I know. Then your apology's not for me. It's for you. He exhaled like he'd been holding it for months. I cut ties with her. I told my parents everything. I sent them the podcast, the files, all of it. Too late, I said. Not bitter, just true. Maybe, he said. But you deserve to know. I see it now. All of it. We hung up without promises. No reconciliation, no neatly tied bows. Because what Rachel did at that dinner didn't just blow up my image, it blew up the illusion, the one where families protect each other, the one where women are safe among their own. She turned my marriage into collateral damage for her own redemption arc. And now, she was left standing in the wreckage alone. Greystone released a statement 3 days later, their first in over a decade on the subject. While we cannot comment on individual alumni matters, we recognize that the stories emerging from a private education align with real concerns from our past. We are launching an internal audit of prior faculty-student interactions and have created an anonymous reporting tool for alumni. It wasn't an admission, but it was an echo. People were listening. I got an email that week from a woman I'd never met. She simply wrote, I didn't go to Greystone, but I know that story. Thank you for telling it. I closed my laptop and stared at the dark screen for a long time, because I hadn't told my story. Not really, but I had cracked open hers. And in doing so, I realized something else. Rachel had spent years building her identity like a fortress, all glass and curated grace. But she forgot one thing. The people who know your secrets are the ones who hold the wrecking ball. She showed up on a Sunday. No warning. No call. Just the sound of knuckles rapping against my apartment door like she still had the right to be part of my life. I didn't move at first. I just stared at the door, wine glass in hand, wondering if I was finally about to see her crumble in person. Then came the second knock. Harder. More desperate. I opened the door. Rachel stood there like she'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. The gloss was gone. Her usually perfect hair looked limp, her skin pale under what was clearly a rushed attempt at makeup. But it was her eyes that hit me hardest. Red-rimmed, hollow, like she hadn't slept since the podcast started its climb. She didn't wait for permission. She walked past me like she still lived here, like this was her stage. But even her movements were fractured now. Too fast. Too loud. She wasn't performing anymore. She was unraveling. I closed the door behind her slowly, turned. You destroyed my life, she said. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't screamed. It was flat, accusatory, like she truly believed it. I didn't respond. I lost the board seat. The foundation pulled my funding. Greystone won't answer my emails. I'm being blackballed. I can't even go to the grocery store without someone whispering. Still, I said nothing. You did this, she repeated, stepping closer. You weaponized my past and used it to make me a monster. I took a sip of wine. Did I fake the photos of you in a hotel bar? She added, voice cracking. No, I said calmly. Did I humiliate you in front of your husband? Yes. Then why? Because you started a war in a room full of people who didn't know the rules. You lit the match and threw it at me. All I did was show the world where your gasoline was stored. Her lip trembled. You don't get to ruin me, she said, barely above a whisper. You ruined yourself. I just didn't cover for you. She looked away, jaw tight. Her hands shook at her sides like she was holding back from smashing something, or breaking. You always hated me, she muttered. I tilted my head. No, I pitied you. Still do, in some ways. Fuck you. There it is, I said. The real Rachel. Her eyes snapped back to mine. You don't know what it was like, she hissed. I was 20. He told me I was brilliant, that I could be more than just someone's wife. I didn't seduce him. I needed him to see me. And there it was. The first honest sentence she'd said since walking in. I could have torn it apart. Could have reminded her that being seen isn't the same as being safe, that her need for validation didn't justify manipulating others, that I was never the enemy. But I didn't, because she wouldn't hear it. Rachel didn't come here for truth. She came for a villain. She needed someone to blame. So I gave her silence. She sank onto my couch like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. Put her face in her hands. Her shoulders trembled. For one tiny second, I saw her as a human again, not the polished nightmare from that dinner. Just a woman, cracked open by consequence. I was scared, she said. When you started the podcast, I thought you'd say my name. I thought people would hate me. They didn't need a name, I said. They recognized the pattern. She nodded, slowly, then looked up. Are you going to keep going? Yes. Why? She asked. You won. I let that sit for a moment. Because it's not just about you, I said. It never was. She stared, confused, or maybe trying to believe it. I walked to the door and opened it. She stayed seated. Rachel, I said softly. She looked up. It's time to leave. She stood slowly, like her bones weighed more now, like the lies had finally sunk into her marrow. At the door, she turned to me. I wanted to be someone people admired. You built admiration on silence, I said. It was never going to last. She left without another word. And when the door clicked shut behind her, I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just stood there, listening to the echo of her footsteps fade. This wasn't a victory lap. It was a eulogy. Not for her. For the person I had to be to survive her. There's no fanfare when the fire goes out. No final explosion. No slow, cinematic fade to black. One day, the smoke just stops. And what you're left with is silence, ruin, and space. That's where I was now. 3 weeks after Rachel walked out of my apartment, the podcast hit 1 million streams. Apple featured it on their front page. Spotify sent me a congratulatory email I didn't open. A producer from a major media outlet asked if I'd consider adapting it for a limited series. I said maybe. But the truth? I didn't care about the metrics anymore, because I had nothing left to prove. Rachel's story was out. Her name hadn't been spoken publicly. Not by me. But it didn't matter. People knew. People always know. Her social accounts remained dark. Her name disappeared from Greystone's website. The nonprofit she founded was restructured, according to a 2-sentence press release. Translation: they gutted it, rebranded, pretended she never existed. Her parents sent me an email, just one, with a polite apology for the dinner. Nothing about the photos, nothing about the lie, just a neat, sanitized, "We regret the circumstances." I deleted it. I didn't respond to Derek either. Not at first. He sent a few messages over those weeks. Some long, some short, none angry. I could feel the guilt in every sentence. He was unraveling the story for himself now. Not just the public mess, but the private one. The way he'd let his sister weaponize our marriage. The way he'd chosen silence when I needed him to speak. Eventually, I agreed to meet him for coffee. No expectations, just answers. He looked tired when I arrived. Not worn down, just honest. The kind of man who finally stopped pretending everything was fine. He stood when I approached. Didn't reach for a hug. Just waited. I sat. We were quiet for a long time. I don't know what I expected, he finally said, but it wasn't this. What? The divorce? No, he said quickly. No, I know that's coming. I nodded. Sipped my coffee. I meant all of it, he added. Rachel, the podcast. You, this version of you. I tilted my head. What version is that? He swallowed. The one who never needed any of us. That made me laugh. Not cruel, just sad. I needed people, I said. I just learned who not to rely on. He looked down. I'm sorry, he said. You've already said that. I'll keep saying it. Don't, I said. Say something that changes things. Or say nothing. He looked at me then. Really looked. And I knew. This was our end. Not with a fight. Not with betrayal. Just truth. You deserve someone who protects you, he said. And you, I said, deserve to learn how. We left it there. No promises, no dramatic goodbye, just a parting that felt earned. After that, I moved. New apartment, smaller, quieter. Sunlight through tall windows and hardwood floors that creak just enough to remind me I'm still here. I started a nonprofit. It's called The Quiet Reclaiming, a space for women who've been shamed by family, silenced by their own, or dragged into moral courtrooms they never agreed to enter. We offer legal aid, counseling, digital literacy training. It's small, fierce, exactly what I wish I'd had. The podcast? Still going. New stories now. Broader. I invite guests anonymously. They speak, and I protect their names like I never got to protect mine. We don't seek revenge. We seek memory. Because memory, when shared, becomes power. People ask me sometimes if I regret any of it. The exposure, the silence, the war. I don't. Not because I won, but because I learned. I learned that revenge isn't about destruction. It's about direction. You decide what to do with your rage, whether to burn everything or build something better from the ashes. Rachel gave me a reason. I gave myself a future. And for the first time in years, I look in the mirror and see someone I recognize. Not the wife, not the target, not the villain in someone else's story. Just me, Natalie, unbroken, unfinished, and finally, free. The mic was already warm. I sat alone in my new apartment, lights low, windows cracked open to the October air. The equipment was the same: the mic, the headphones, the editing software I'd memorized like a second language. But something felt different tonight. Because this time, I wasn't hiding. No voice filter. No alias. No anonymous narrator. This was me, Natalie. And this was the final episode. I hit record. A year ago, I sat at a dinner table and watched someone throw a match at my life. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I stood up, walked out, and started digging. Pause. What you've heard over these 10 episodes wasn't just a story, it was a reckoning. A truth wrapped in fiction, because truth, on its own, isn't always safe. Or simple. But today, I'm telling it plainly. I breathed in. I was called a whore at my own family's dinner table. Because I met with male clients in hotel bars. Because I dared to have a life outside the box they built for me. What they didn't know was that those men were survivors, clients from a trauma foundation. I was helping them rebuild, just like I had to rebuild myself. The woman who exposed me, my sister-in-law, did so to protect her own secret. Years ago, she was involved in an inappropriate relationship with a professor. She was 20. He was married. She was quietly transferred. He quietly resigned. She buried it. And when my independence threatened her curated life, she tried to remind everyone who she thought I really was. But stories have a way of echoing. I let silence stretch. This podcast started as a way to tell that story, but what I found was so much bigger. I found women who whispered memories they'd never spoken aloud. I found students, mothers, professionals, Strangers, all carrying the same wound. A wound shaped like shame. My voice didn't crack. It stayed calm, clear. And shame, when shared, becomes strength. So this is the last episode of A Private Education, not because the work is done, but because this chapter is. My name is Natalie. I'm 33. I'm a survivor of public humiliation, of family betrayal, of moral performance passed off as virtue. I am not the woman you saw in those photos. I'm the one who took back the pen. I let the silence sit again. No background music, no fades, just my voice, my breath, real. To every listener who saw themselves in these stories, thank you. To every woman who's ever been whispered about, judged, dismissed, or disbelieved, I see you. We don't have to set ourselves on fire to keep others warm. Sometimes the quietest woman in the room is the one building the loudest legacy. Click. Stop recording. I sat back, letting the weight of the moment settle across my shoulders. It wasn't victory. It was release. The episode uploaded at midnight. Within an hour, comments started flooding in. Messages, emails, submissions from other women asking if they could tell their stories, share their names, join the work. It wasn't just a podcast anymore. It was a movement. Rachel? She didn't respond. She'd vanished from the digital world completely. Rumor had it she moved across the country, changed her name, or maybe just started over somewhere no one remembered. Greystone or podcasts or dinner tables gone nuclear. I didn't care, because her absence was louder than her attacks ever were. And me? I was finally whole. Not because I got revenge, but because I stopped asking for someone else's permission to exist. I got a letter in the mail the next week. Handwritten. No return address. It read, "You didn't just tell my story. You made it safe to tell mine. Thank you for setting the fire. We'll keep it burning." I pinned it above my desk. Next to it, the first episode script. Framed. A reminder of who I was when I wrote it, who I had to become to survive it, and who I'll never be again. This was never about ruining someone. It was about revealing someone, including myself. And when the truth was finally loud enough, I didn't just escape the fire. I walked out of it new.